Oh! Hello, financial freedom seekers. Simon Dixon here, and welcome to the Halloween special on the 10 scariest moments in Bitcoin and crypto. I'm going to be going through the 10 scariest moments in Bitcoin and crypto, and we're going to have a little bit of fun because we have been deadly serious, and I've been my usual British dry humor. But today I'm going to try and mix it up a little bit so we can do something different. So I've got my 10 moments in crypto. I'm going to jump straight into them right now with the very first one. And then we're going to jump over to Twitter Spaces where we'll do our usual AMA and answer your questions. And we're going to try and get through this one without talking about Celsius. Okay, so let's just jump in with the first one. The first one of the scariest moments in crypto was we are today celebrating 14 years since the white paper was written. This time 14 years ago, Satoshi Nakamoto sent out the cypherpunk mailing list, his white paper on the thing that was never meant to succeed, that was always going to fail, and that was the Bitcoin white paper. But a few years later, in 2011, I managed to pull together my last bit of credit card debt when I was approximately £150,000 in debt trying to create a bank, and another £100,000 in mortgage, about £250,000, when Bliss Dixon, the co-founder of Bank to the Future, said, we're going to pull our last bit of credit card debt together and we're going to fly over to Prague and we're going to go to the conference that was organized by Amir Taki with a bunch of crazies over to the middle of Prague, and we're going to go to the first Bitcoin conference in Europe. It was called the European Bitcoin Conference, and the price of Bitcoin crashed from $30 to $3. That's a 90% correction while we're on the plane flying over to this crazy place called the first Bitcoin conference. And we had that 90% correction where we went over and bought our first Bitcoin as well. But it wasn't so scary in the end because we were all there celebrating the fact that we had peer-to-peer electronic cash since the white paper that was going to take on the banking system. We were all absolutely crazy. We had zero chance of succeeding, and yet Bitcoin became what it did. But that was a scary moment. When you crash from $30 to $3, everybody tells you how crazy you are and that this thing is dead and it's never meant to be. And I told you so, you crazy, stupid, dumb idiot, for buying that stupid peer-to-peer electronic cash, Magic the Gathering online exchange traded crazy thing. So it was pretty crazy. And I also remember after the Bitcoin conference, you had to go around and there was a special hack event afterwards. And after the event, you had to go around to these secret locations and they would text message you, give them an SMS, and then you get a code and you went to this different location and it would tell you the next piece of the event that you could go to. After about 3 or 4 of these going around Prague in this crazy time, we ended up in what I could only call a crack den. And it looked like the most, this derelict university in the middle of Prague. And you went around these little, this derelict place, and it was an absolute shithole. And eventually you got to a secret place where you could knock on the code and someone with an anonymous mask would come in, and you'd be entering in the hacker's den. And in the hacker's den, you could spend 1 Bitcoin and scan it on this hacked together piece of paper wallet, QR code vending machine that would give you access to 1 Mars bar for 1 Bitcoin. And it was pretty much one of the scariest moments in crypto. We weren't hackers. We were like the banker, the first banker. I left my job in banking in 2006, and this was up in 2011. Bitcoin had crashed. It was at $3, and we were in a crack den trying to figure out what was going on in this. However, we saw potential. We ended up really transforming our business, Bank to the Future. And also, I launched the first published book in the world that included Bitcoin, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust. That was scary moment number 1. we got through that. And Bitcoin started trading higher, and we had the whole Bitcoin pizza guy that somebody spent 10,000 Bitcoins on 2 pizzas. And then we had our first crypto bankruptcy. Scariest moment number 2 was Mt. Gox. This one, it felt like everything was over. We were dead. We were going around the walking dead. It was the zombie apocalypse of Bitcoin. And Mt. Gox had crashed. 70% of all Bitcoins, of all traded Bitcoins that weren't in cold storage, were on Mt. Gox, and everybody, withdrawals were suspended. Everyone was talking about it. And Mt. Gox, you could not log in, you couldn't withdraw your funds anymore, and they never opened again. They suddenly found 200,000 Bitcoins. We had about 850,000 Bitcoins locked up in Mt. Gox. And it really felt like Bitcoin could not return from this. Mt. Gox was systemically too important. This was our moment. The industry was over, and we thought it was all gone. However, Mt. Gox was not the Bitcoins. Many were held on paper wallets, private keys. At the first Bitcoin conference, Isabella was there. She had just co-founded Trezor, from a lab that she had created for those that wanted to fund Bitcoin. Bank to the Future had opened, and we presented our vision for separating custody accounts from investment accounts, shared it in the book as well. But we got past it anyway. But that was a really hard time when that had happened. And so that was a really scary moment. How we ever recovered from that, but about 200,000 Bitcoins were kind of suddenly found under Mark Capellis's mattress. And still to this day, they haven't been distributed yet. They're still going through this process because there were so many lawsuits, and it went into this process called financial rehabilitation or something like that. The equivalent of Chapter 11, but in Japan. And it's still going through that process, and hopefully people will get those about 10% of their Bitcoins back. And it went up to a multi-billion-dollar asset class that took it out of bankruptcy because of this rehabilitation process. So that was scary moment number 2. Scariest moment in crypto and Bitcoin number 3 was Wikileaks. I remember this is when Satoshi Nakamoto left the project and said, we are not ready for the type of traffic that Wikileaks is going to send us. So Wikileaks was a website that went through a financial blockade and financial censorship. Bank of America said that they were going to close anyone's bank account that sent money to Wikileaks. PayPal shut down, Visa, MasterCard, everyone blockaded Wikileaks and would not allow Wikileaks in order to transact. So Wikileaks took the website down and said, until we solve our financial issues, nobody is going to benefit from Wikileaks. And we're using Bitcoin in order to fund it. Satoshi Nakamoto shit a brick, got really scared and said, we're not ready for this type of traffic. It's a beta project. We can't have this type of attention to the project. We're not ready. But WikiLeaks essentially became the funding mechanism for websites that were suffering financial censorship and were dealing with freedom of speech issues. So the WikiLeaks survived. It reopened the site and it became an important player. Julian Assange, till this day, is still going through his cases as a result of doing, essentially providing freedom of speech to people online. The next scariest moment is Bitcoin. I think it got up to approximately $100. So we survived from the crash. We went from $30 to $3, and we bounced back through WikiLeaks and the Cyprus situation. I think it was before this, can't remember the timeline, but we got up to $100. And what happens? The main user case for Bitcoin at this time was gambling through Eric Voorhees' sites, which was Satoshi Dice. He did the first ever Bitcoin ICO, as it were, where people were investing in Bitcoin. He got a hit from the SEC saying that this was an unregistered security. It was actually one of the most successful investments that outperformed Bitcoin, but it had to unwind as a result. And then all of a sudden, the US Department of Justice started releasing documentaries on how Bitcoin was being used through Silk Road as a way of buying drugs online. They start to attack it, and Silk Road gets shut down with all the Bitcoins on Russ Ulbricht's laptop, and the site gets taken down, and everybody immediately, the price of Bitcoin crashes. And then something really, really strange happened. It was this scary moment where we thought, okay, Bitcoin's going to be portrayed as this currency just for drug dealers, and all the naysayers were going to say we're right. But suddenly the price started to recover, and it started to recover after the Silk Road crash, and then hit all new all-time highs. It turns out that the fact that it was being portrayed as a currency just for drug dealers was putting off some investors, and Bitcoin recovered further and went and hit over $300 in the aftermath as well. So that was a real scary moment when it looked like all of the Bitcoins were going to be owned by the Department of Justice, and they went and confiscated all those Bitcoins. It turned out that the FBI were actually corrupt. They were threatening Russ Ulbricht. They took a bunch of the Bitcoins, and 2 of the FBI agents ended up in prison. And then the FBI auctioned off those Bitcoins to some of the early VCs in our industry. And I think it was Tim Draper and others that went up and bought up those Bitcoins. They ended up buying, I think it was 10,000 or 30,000 Bitcoins at a price of an average of about $600. The price crashed further. Everyone said, you're crazy for buying those Bitcoins at $600. It's just a currency for drug dealers. Bitcoin's dead. Nothing's coming back. It has no use case. Wikileaks is getting shut down. There's nothing. Bitcoin is crazy. There's this social experiment that's dead. It's over. You are crazy MFs. Then we go through this sideways market. We start to recover the market. Bitcoin, through Willy bot manipulation, it went from $1,000 down to $250. It's around about 2014. I go on CNBC, look up Simon Dixon, CNBC in YouTube, and you find me on there telling people how Bitcoin has all this potential. It allows you to own your own money, how to spend your own money. There's lots of use cases, and we were funding businesses at Bank to the Future. We were funding Eric Voorhees' DEXs. We were funding BitPay. We were looking at all these different crazy exchanges like Kraken and Bitstamp and Bitfinex. Then suddenly, rewind forward that to 2016, gets hacked. 119,000 Bitcoins get stolen. We thought the whole thing was over. We got Mt. Gox all over again. Bitfinex didn't have the money. It turned them insolvent. And so we contacted the Bitfinex team, and we put together the world's first security token through an IOU token, and it recovered the whole thing. Turned out to be one of the best investments on Bank to the Future. It went from a low of 30 cents to $16, and everybody got equity in the company. They got lots of dividends as it entered into the Bitcoin bull market. And then this crazy little website called Binance came along. It couldn't get banking. The founder, CZ, he'd left OKX where he was working, and he went to the Chengdu conference where I was at in China. And at that Chengdu conference, he came up with this idea for the BNB token, and he couldn't get a bank account, so he used Tether. Tether suddenly became this huge thing. Because Binance started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it recovered from the hack. And then we had this ICO boom. Ethereum launched. Ethereum almost went bankrupt in that crash. It raised about $18 million from so that was the fifth moment, by the way, the Bitfinex hack. And it raised about $18 million and almost went bankrupt because the price of Bitcoin crashed. Vitalik stopped being a journalist. He left Bitcoin Magazine. He tried to create colored coins on top of Bitcoin so that we could add NFTs. It wasn't working. The technology wasn't what he wanted. So he went and created his own blockchain. The Bitcoin community all got their Bitcoins out and funded this ICO. And they chucked a bunch of Bitcoins into Vitalik's project, but the price of Bitcoin kept crashing. The Ethereum Foundation almost went bankrupt. It couldn't release the code on time. The price of Bitcoin recovered, and suddenly the Ethereum code got released, but it was pretty much useless. No one had a use case. So a bunch of the people that worked for the Ethereum Foundation, they said, I've got an idea. Why don't we create a decentralized VC fund? Ignore all securities laws, and the DAO was launched. They created Slockit, they created all this different technology, and then suddenly a 16-year-old came along and hacked the whole thing after it raised approximately $150 million in the first decentralized VC fund called the DAO. They were shitting themselves. The SEC was looking at it. A 16-year-old objected to the smart contract. Ethereum were all, is this the end of the project? Or many of the Ethereum founders had invested many of their ETH in the project, and that was the sixth scariest moment in crypto. And suddenly they decided that they would fork the chain, and you ended up with this essentially a new version of Ethereum. The original Ethereum, called Ethereum Classic, got left behind, and we discovered this whole fork thing, that when you try and go across, you end up with two different chains. And with those two different chains, the new Ethereum came along, it bailed out and proved that there is reversibility in the Ethereum blockchain when you have a centralized entity, a foundation behind it that can influence people, and people started to question the ethics of reversing chains and really start to see the importance of proof of work in Bitcoin versus proof of work that can have these 51% attacks, can have reversibility just to bail out their friends that invested in an illegal security. Then the SEC came along and said the DAO is an illegal security, published that paper, and everyone stopped doing ICOs because they realized that they were illegal securities. And then we moved into the next phase where everyone forgot about that. And in the 2017 Binance launch, they started doing all these launch pads. The BNB token came along, and everyone started launching tokens all over again based upon Ethereum, forgot about the DAO. And we entered into the seventh scariest moment in crypto, which was the scaling debate. The scaling debate was a real divide. We were at the Satoshi roundtable. Brian Armstrong was shouting at everybody. Roger Ver was saying to everybody, if we don't get these fees down, if we don't increase the block size, then we're in trouble. The core developers were saying, it's not as simple as that. You've got to get minor consensus. And if we increase the block size, it will get more and more centralized. People won't be able to run nodes. It will become more expensive to run these nodes. And the industry went absolutely berserk and bonkers with each other. The centralized, a bunch of companies got together. Barry Silber organized these different things. Eric Voorhees got together, and there was a compromise. We met in Hong Kong, where I lived at the time, in the Bitcoin scaling conferences. And the second one, we finally reached consensus, where all the miners were mainly based in China at the time, met up with all the developers that were geographically located everywhere. And we signed an agreement called SegWit 2X. SegWit 2X was meant to be the compromise, but then it realized that it's not that simple. You can't just collude. Bitcoin is decentralized, and no matter what you do, it's incredibly hard to get consensus on these major code changes. But the path, Blockstream wanted to put together Lightning Network. They wanted to scale it off-chain through layer 2. And we went through this debate, and finally it got settled when I was in a tour with Jim Rogers in China. I think it was 2017, 2018, memory serves me well. when the users all figured out that there was something called a user-activated soft fork, and the node operators could exercise their influence and threaten the miners, showing that neither the miners nor the developers controlled the network, and that Bitcoin truly was decentralized. And this bottom-up movement called the user-activated soft fork came along, and I was on the stage in China presenting when it hit this consensus and this activation methodology with the nodes that Bitcoin was going to enable segregated witness that allowed for layer 2 scaling, and the attack of the scaling debate could not continue. So a second, Bitmain announced, one of the big miners that produced all the mining equipment, that they were going to create their new coin, and it was going to be called Bitcoin Cash. And then Roger Ver, that was investing in all of the many companies, he came along and said, well, I'm going to back that. And Bitmain's coin got launched into the network. And then this different community came along. Now, at this time, Korea entered. South Korea started investing in the industry. BitThumb became one of the largest crypto exchanges out there. And this hard fork happened. It split in two, and suddenly Bitcoin Cash, the price started pumping. It would launch on Kraken. If you had your coins on Kraken, then Bitfinex created this prediction market. And the price of Bitcoin Cash started to go up and up and up from South Korean speculators on the BitThumb exchange. You had this whole kimchi, arbitrage that exists, and you entered new people like Sam Bankman-Fried came along, and then they were arbing, sending money around the world, trying to take advantage of these price differentials as we had this craziness during these hard forks. And you had this real different, the different markets. You had the Chinese market, the Japanese market, the South Korean market, the American market, and all these different arbitrage opportunities. But in the end, Bitcoin got through it again. It proved that nobody can take over the network. Companies colluding, the most influential companies couldn't take over the network. The most influential VCs like Barry Silbert and Digital Currency Group, they could not take over the network. Those that were important in the infrastructure, the developers, the core developers, and everyone in between, and the users and the node operators ended up creating this bottom-up chaotic movement. Many people thought Bitcoin was dead. It will never recover from this. There's no longer 21 million Bitcoins if you can fork off, but they completely went their separate ways. Relay protection was implemented, which stopped people losing their coins. At Bitcoin.com, they started to call Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin. People started to get confused, and it felt like a very, very confusing moment. Bitcoin crashed, and we didn't think we were, it felt like it wasn't going to recover, but we got through it. And that was the 7th scariest moment in Bitcoin. The community went their separate ways, and Bitcoin trooped on like a trooper. Then came along the scammers, the Bitcoin killers. Dr. Ruger came along in the 8th scariest moment in Bitcoin, where you went around and anybody that was new to Bitcoin was buying this new kid on the block called OneCoin. It was a complete Ponzi scheme. It was a complete scam. And suddenly billions and billions were being invested into these scams. The Bitcoin community was saying, there's no blockchain. It doesn't even exist. And all of the people out there, I remember we went, there was hairdressers that were telling me, you got to buy OneCoin as the new thing. And billions was going into what became the largest Ponzi scheme, this multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. Everyone was getting confused. BitConnect launched, and all of these Plus token came in China. Then there was these huge multi-billion-dollar Ponzi schemes in India, and it was going absolutely crazy. Everyone was confused. Everyone was claiming this is the next Bitcoin killer. Get in at the bottom. Get in the ground up. No one understood. The Bitcoin community understood the big difference, but the new people to the block that were being enticed in by the ICO boom, they put billions into these things, and they crashed, and Dr. Ruger disappeared. Apparently, she even got a sex change to hide her identity, and there were serious players behind this. This was also the same time when the Mt. Gox hacker got exposed as well. And that turned out that it was behind one of the big exchanges that was laundering all of the coins from Silk Road, called, oh God, what was the name of the exchange? eCoin? I think it was eCoin. Jesus, I can't even remember that exchange. And it was then there was this big connection between Silk Road, Mt. Gox, the hacking, and it wasn't eCoin. I can't even remember the name of the exchange now. Someone in the comments can let me know. And OneCoin disappeared, and then all the regulators came out and started warning people. Then I was on a boat in China, in Shanghai, and suddenly while we were on the boat, there was this after party. I'd been doing the long tour. China was where most of the Bitcoin trading was happening. A lot of the Bitcoin mining operations were there. And suddenly an announcement came out that China, the Chinese government, was going to start arresting exchange operators in China. They were flip-flopping before. Before this, in 2013, they released a documentary on China-controlled national TV because they thought it was a way of attacking the dollar and getting some geopolitical tension there. But suddenly, this time, the 9th scariest moment in Bitcoin happened. It was the China ban. We were on a boat, and suddenly these sirens came through. Most of the Bitcoin community were on this boat. And the sirens came through. We thought we were all goners for being Bitcoiners, and suddenly it went past and there was something unrelated. Then the China ban came back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. It's banned, it's not banned, it's banned, it's not banned, it's banned, it's not banned. And I decided that it was no longer time to present on Bitcoin in China. This time, this became one of the best-selling books. This went completely viral. Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, the Mandarin version. And I'm sure it's completely censored right now, but that went and sold many, many more books and got many, many people into Bitcoin in those early days as well. And finally, it brings us to, that I couldn't do it. How are we doing for time? We're on, 3 minutes left until we head over to Twitter Spaces. You thought that I could get through at least one broadcast without talking about Celsius, but without a doubt, the 10th scariest moment in Bitcoin was our Lehman Brothers of Bitcoin moment when 3 Arrows Capital had gone bust. We got Voyager that had gone down. We've got Sam Bankman-Friedman running around trying to construct all these deals based upon all the money that he'd put into these different areas. They were all interconnected. And then the day that my father passed away, the 12th of June this year, we had the moment when Celsius hit the pause. And it became absolute carnage. And that brings us to exactly where we are here today, where we have this moment in history. We've had our Lehman Brothers of crypto moment. The Celsius pause has happened. We've got all these different companies, and then we're working now on recovery plans in order to allow those victims of the zombie that happened out of this. The CEO went silent. We heard from him from a couple of times since, but now we've all moved on, and we get to turn this into something that ushers the next wave of adoption in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. It's really scary times for many if you haven't been through all of these different cycles. I've been through them all. I've seen my $30 Bitcoin crash to $3. I've seen my $1,250 Bitcoin crash to $250. I've seen my $20,000 Bitcoin crash to $3,000 during a pandemic. And I've now seen my $69,000 Bitcoin crash to approximately $20,000 dollars, or down to a low of about $17,000, and whatever comes next. But here's one thing that is for certain. Bitcoin gives you the ability to own your own money, to spend your own money, and it has a fixed supply. And that never changes. The emotions of fear and greed always changes. These zombie companies come along, they go, we go through our craziness. We have our pauses, we recover, and the traditional economy always produces the same results. The ability for you not to own your own money when you deposit at a bank, the bank becomes the legal owner of your money. And when they become the legal owner of their money, they can spend it as they choose. And as we move to more and more central bank digital currencies, which is communism on a blockchain, you get more and more financial censorship. And as more and more disasters, and as the Ponzi scheme unwinds, whether it's the credit card crisis, whether it's the bank crisis, whether it's liquidity crisis, whether it's the pension scheme crisis, whether it's the student loan debt crisis, whether it's whatever comes next, or it's a black swan event like a tiny island of 350,000 people in Iceland, which investment bankers have taken over and turned it into the next catalyst event, whatever it may be, there will always be these black swan events in the traditional financial system. And people will eventually realize that money that you can own, money that you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply is not as scary as it seems when it crashes. And the fundamentals prevail, and we end up as a bigger and bigger industry each time. I know that you might be suffering from hyperinflation or bad inflation and a cost of living crisis in your country. I know that rates are going to be increased, and that's going to put up the cost of your mortgage. I know that wars are going to be reigned that lead to gas prices and electricity prices that are unsustainable. And I know that at the same time, it doesn't help if you've got all your money locked up on a platform like Celsius. But one thing we can do is we can ensure that in these scary times, we learn and we get better and we recover and we figure out together how to cover each and every individual that's been done by this after we structure Celsius and these other companies to recover from this. And next year, we could be working on some of the most difficult challenges that can be solved by Bitcoin with sovereign countries. It could start with El Salvador, that can benefit because they embraced our industry in a time when we're going to see some of the most challenging times ahead, and global shifts, monetary renegotiations, and many of those trends that I've been warning people against. If it was over a decade ago in the book, the new book that I'm writing, retirementplanb.com, where I shared how to protect yourself in the Great Depression of the 2020s. We can support sovereign countries whose fiat currencies has wrecked them and show them that there is a third alternative. It's not just the IMF. It's not just China's Belt and Road Initiative, but there is actually Bitcoin-backed bonds, and there is all sorts of financial innovation that we can create together as long as we can restructure these companies and show, just like with Bitfinex, we can get better results. And show that together we can recover from this and turn disaster into opportunity through creative destruction, through Austrian economics, through hard money, through Schumpeterian creative destruction that turns into opportunity for all of us, because countries will need us in the future. So I'm going to head over to Twitter Spaces right now. But as scary as it gets, those 10 scariest moments in crypto, we always recover. And I have no doubt in my mind that this will be another moment just like that. When you look back at this and we cover the scariest moment next year and the year after, that it actually turned into be a good moment to you, just like each of those 10 events was, where we learned more, we did better, it pushed the industry forward, and we figured out how to be more diversified and a better investor as we usher into the most interesting and exciting time in financial history. Many are going to get hurt. Others are going to do really well. I want you to be on the right side of that change. So if you're not following me on Twitter right now, I'm going to head over to Twitter Spaces at Simon Dixon Twit. And if you enjoyed this, do me a favor, hit that like button before you go out trick-or-treating, and hit the subscribe button, hit that bell symbol, hit all, and share this with anybody that would like to share their scariest moments in crypto. In the comment section below, if you think I should have covered a different scary moment in crypto, or you would like to share any of your experiences, any of my 10 scariest moments in crypto, then I will read all those comments. But please do like, please do share, please do subscribe. We need more people to get on the right side of financial history, and I'm going to need your help in order to do that. So I will see you. We're going to be doing it with peace. We're going to be doing it with love. We're going to be doing it with unity. I'm heading over to Twitter Spaces right now. Peace.